Okay guys, today we're going to talk about the immune system.
Hello guys, I'm one of your hosts, Raoul Thomas, and Stephen Chau is now coming with a cup of tea.
Yes, I'm Stephen Chau, you're the host.
There are many viruses, bacteria, pathogens and fungi all around you, outside your body. But do you know that you got 20 billion bacteria in your mouth right now?
That's a hell of a lot. Also, these bacteria, fungi, viruses and pathogens are not just microorganisms that sit there every day and just do some relaxing stuff. Actually, they can be very harmful for you. They can affect, even kill you.
So why are you and I still here today? That's because of our personal army, ladies and gentlemen, our immune system. If we would not have an immune system, we could die from a simple cold within a week.
Pretty dangerous. Before we get on with the immune system, we first need to know our enemies. These little creatures are called pathogens that makes us sick. There are in total 4 groups that we've mentioned earlier, called the viruses, bacteria, the pathogens and the fungi. Diseases that are caused by pathogens making one another sick are called transmissible diseases.
Now, how do they enter? There are several ways in which pathogen can enter your body. The first one is by direct contact. This term is already self-explanatory, but I'll take the effort to explain you briefly. This is when an infected person has its pathogen transmitted to an uninfected person by direct contact, like shaking hands or having sexual intercourse. Also, 2 persons using the same towel increases the risk drastically because you don't want herpes on your face, I presume. Next up, we have indirect transmission. The indirect transmission is when pathogens reach you and me without having physical contact. How?
Well, for example, if someone sneezes or coughs, then the area around him will contain lots of pathogens. That means if you enter their area, you could breathe in their viruses, and you don't want that. Water and food are also very attractive to pathogens. If you eat or drink something that is contaminated without knowing it, you may get infected. Last but not least, we have got vectors. A vector is simply an organism that carries pathogens from one to another. Skunks, dogs, raccoons and bats are all examples of vectors of the rabies virus. So, if a dog bites you in a foreign country, far from here, you better see a GP.
However, our body is able to defend against those pathogens. The human body has multiple defenses against those pathogens. It has mechanical defenses and chemical defenses. Of course, our army needs a fortress, and the fortress needs a wall, which is your skin and your nostril hairs, for example. These are all mechanical defenses. It also has chemical defenses. Every day, our body is in a suspenseful chemical warfare with the intruders. For example, the hydrochloric acid in your stomach or the mucus in your throat, which can trap pathogen. These are all chemical defenses.
Now, our immune system itself. Of course, our body is strong enough with all those defenses, but what if they still manage to get through? Let's take a look at that, shall we?
The activation of the immune response typically begins when a pathogen enters the body. Here you can see a pathogen and a macrophage.
Macrophages are big eaters and a type of phagocytes. They can engulf pathogens and recognize them. Macrophages that encounter pathogens ingest, process and display the antigen fragments on the cell surfaces. Macrophages with antigen displayed on the surfaces are called antigen-presenting cells. An antigen-presenting macrophage interacts with a T helper cell that can recognize the same antigen.
Helper T cells are basically the message carriers in our immune system. They are responsible for the stimulation of growth of B cells into plasma cells and memory cells. And they are also activators of cytotoxic T cells and macrophages.
During the interaction, the macrophage releases a chemical signal called interleukin-1, which stimulates the T helper cell to secrete interleukin-2. Interleukin-2 causes the proliferation of certain cytotoxic T cells and B cells.
Cytotoxic T cells are also known as killer T cells. Normal cells of the body that become infected can also digest some of the pathogens and can display antigen fragments on the cell surfaces. The body makes millions of different types of cytotoxic T cells. Each type is able to recognize a particular antigen. The The cytotoxic T cells that are capable of recognizing the antigen displayed on the cell surfaces bind to the infected cells and produce chemicals that kill the cells. This results in destruction of the pathogens in the cells. These cells also come in millions of different types, each able to recognize a particular antigen.
And now the helper T cells kicks into action.
Once the T cells have some stimulating chemicals, the B cell starts differentiating into plasma cells. These plasma cells become antibody-producing factories, flooding the bloodstream with antibodies that can bind to antigens involving this infection. The antibodies connect to a specific pathogen.
The antibodies can now do two things. Either it can simply alert the macrophages to come and digest them, or the antibodies may start off a reaction in the blood which produces enzymes to digest them. In this scenario, we will take the first one. Of course, our cells cannot just produce a bunch of antibodies. It will be very tiring and a waste of energy. Some lymphocytes don't make antibodies at all, but instead they remain seated and observe closely and wait until a particle of a pathogen lands on their bodies. This way they can store info and build up their database. This cell building up your database is called a memory cell. The memory cells make sure that you can react faster next time when the same pathogen comes in. And ta-da! You've become immune to that pathogen.
This process is entirely executed by your own body, and it's called active immunity. An example of this is injecting a weakened version of a pathogen into your bloodstream to make you immune for that disease or that particular pathogen.
But when it comes to breastfeeding, there will be a presence of passive immunity. Passive immunity is when your immune system is enhanced through other antibodies from other animals. For example, your mother passes antibodies to you through breastfeeding.
So that's it for today, guys. We hope you learned a lot and see you next time.